What's up, Rent to Retires? My name is Lars Kappler, and today we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges made easy. Before we get started, make sure you do hit the like button on this video as well as subscribe to our channel for all the most recent turnkey real estate information that we have. All right, let's get started. One of the big questions I get every single day on the phones when I'm talking to investors is, what should I do with my property now that real estate values have exploded over the past few years? One of the best options you can do is a 1031 exchange. Some people get a little bit overwhelmed with 1031 exchanges because there is a lot of rules. So we're going to do our best today to help simplify that and make 1031 exchanges easy. So every 1031 exchange has a few basic requirements. First of all, exchange must involve a like-kind property. Secondly, there is a 45-day identification period. The properties must close within 180 days of the original property. And finally, you must use a qualified intermediary. So what does all this mean? Let's find out. So a like-kind property is something that is very confusing to a lot of people. Basically, the like-kind property essentially means the property must be an investment property exchanged for another investment property. Now, an investment property does not count as a flip, right? So it can be a commercial, residential, undeveloped, or developed property. Each can be exchangeable with each other. However, the property cannot be a flip. If you originally bought the property with the intent to sell the property after adding just a few improvements, then the IRS is not going to allow that exchange to happen. Another thing to note is that your primary residence cannot be used in a 1031 exchange. Next up is the 45-day identification period. The 45-day identification period starts when the original property closes. Now, there's a couple weird rules in here that we want to talk about that are not something we want to get overly complicated with. Again, we want to keep this simple. So the first one is the 3 property rule. So an investor may identify up to 3 properties regardless of value, and they only really need to finish one of those properties to complete the exchange. Meaning, if I was selling a property for $200,000 and I was looking to buy new properties, I could identify properties up to millions of dollars if I identify 3 properties or less. If I want to get the best value out of my 1031 exchange, this might be the best way to go about doing this. Now, if I want to diversify the most that I can, then we might exceed the 3 property rule. If we do, then we have to pay attention to the 200% rule. So this comes into play if you exceed 3 properties. You can identify any number of properties. Basically, the sum of the value of the properties of their fair market value needs to be less than 200% of the fair market value of the original property the investor is selling. So we'll get into some examples here in a minute, but ultimately the key things here are, if you want to do more than 3 properties, you need to identify less than 200% of the original property's value. Next up, we do have 180 days to close the property. This 180-day clock starts on the day you close your original property. The title is required to pass in that 180 days. If you go longer than that, the exchange will fail. The time frame with the 45-day identification period runs concurrently with the 180-day window. And then finally, we need to use a qualified intermediary for any 1031 exchange. Sellers cannot touch the money in between the sale of the old property and the purchase of a new property. If you do, the IRS is going to flag your exchange and it's not going to work out. Secondly, the party who serves in this role, it cannot be someone that is part of your family or someone you've had a business relationship, aka a business partner, over the last 2 years. We use 1031 intermediaries that we have listed on our website regularly because they do a good job and they are able to make sure we're following these rules. So check out our website, renttoretirement.com, click on About Us, and you'll be able to find a very good 1031 exchange intermediary. Then finally, the intermediary will hold the proceeds of the original sale in a separate account until the purchase of the new property is complete. So let's get into some real world examples of 1031 exchanges. I've been working with a few different investors lately on these exchanges, so let's kind of get into the weeds here. So in this particular exchange, the investor came to me after they closed the original property, so we were working on a very condensed time frame. We were able to quickly identify the properties involved here. The original sale price of the property that she sold was $400,000. When she wanted to identify properties, she wanted to acquire as many properties as she could. We ended up picking 5 properties, which means that we exceeded the 3 property rule. Because we exceeded the 3 property rule, we had to stay below 200%. Essentially, we had to stay below $800,000. So the total sum of the properties she acquired is $763,000. So we were below the 200% by $37,000. So right now, all these properties are identified. They are working towards closing, and she's going to have to close before September 4th, which should be no problem. The next example, the investor came to us a little bit sooner. We had plenty of time here to start identifying properties. The total sale price of the original property was $795,000. So our 200% rule was close to $1.6 million. So we had a lot of room to work here. He again wanted to go over 3 properties. So we needed to stay below 200%. So we identified a few properties. This gentleman wanted a few new builds. So we looked at some new builds. We got some rehab properties. So we got a good mix of properties in here. And again, he's got plenty of time. We haven't even reached the identification window yet. So if something comes up or something changes, it'll be very easy to swap out properties here. And finally, this one was a little bit of a bigger transaction. The investor wanted to stretch the initial sale of $340,000 as far as they possibly could. Now, this was possible because the original sale was multiple transactions. So this investor, if it was all one transaction, would have exceeded the 200% rule. But because they were doing multiple transactions on the original sale, the 1031 intermediary that we used in this case was able to separate the properties into multiple exchanges. So this investor was able to exceed the 200% rule because they followed the 3 property rule. So each of these exchanges was 3 properties or less, allowing them to group everything together and ultimately complete this exchange without going over any of the IRS rules. So again, I hope that was helpful. That was 1031 exchanges made easy. Please check us out at renttoretirement.com. Please make sure you click like on this video and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.